of what we're going through. This is what I call the mid-month. Generally, the 9th, 10th, 12th of the month, we get the regular USDA webinar. We're going to talk, please stay on to the end, and we're going to provide some details on the upcoming crop survey we'd like to have you all participate in. And certainly if you type questions in, we don't have time to answer them. We will do our best to get back to you or address them in the weekly newsletter. This is, and join us with Bobby Lindeman from Watertown, South Dakota. I don't know if Bobby and I have done this before. Hopefully we can do it again. This is the standard risk disclosure statement that we have to do on every seminar, class, webinar we do. And I'll go through the first and last sentence to give you the thrust of what you need to know. That an investment in futures contract is speculative, involves a high degree of risk, and suitable only for persons who can assume the risk of loss in excess of their margin deposits. So you can lose money trading futures and options. Direct your attention to the last sentence in the last paragraph. Opinions expressed herein are the opinions of the author only and not of the opinion of any firm the author may be affiliated or associated with. So what we're going to talk about today is latest crop projections for South America, a supply demand for 2019-20. We'll watch the market reaction. It's already been a very volatile day. Analysis and final thoughts. And so when we get in, Bobby, I'll probably have you do some of the commentary on the crop size and all that. This year we have changed it up a little bit in that we're not only looking at what the trade was looking at last month, but comparing it to where the numbers were last year. The big report is at the end of the month, March 31st. That will be prospective acreage and grain stocks, and that'll be a very big day, very important day. This is the two reports, not US, but global crop production. They won't be changing any US numbers. And then the World Ag Supply Demand, the World Ag Outlook Board, the WASDE group, will be plugging in those numbers. So this is what we're looking at in today's reports, and a lot of attention will be focused on what we're getting out of South America. What to watch for on corn? Will the USDA reduce corn export projections? It's been pretty dismal. It's improved for a couple of weeks and then went back into really disappointing numbers the last few Thursdays. And at some point, I think they're going to have to lower the ending stocks, lower exports, and this would increase ending stocks. We'll look at the global numbers here in a bit. Even with large crops, we have seen global ending stocks of corn and soybeans move lower. Crush numbers have been really good. Export numbers have been okay, better than a year ago, but still not that great. And so will the USDA increase the soybean crush within the U.S., the domestic crush, reduce ending stocks? Will the USDA begin, as private people have, to increase crop projections in South America? And year to year, we're seeing global stocks begin to move lower. For wheat, well, the exports have been pretty good. Exports, will they reduce ending stocks? And we're seeing some production problems in Australia and Argentina may take those numbers down. It seems like month after month, Bobby, we look at the wheat and say, oh, we should get a positive report this month. But when I look at the wheat ending stocks in the U.S., they're certainly lower than last year. When I look at global supplies, though, they're still very burdensome.
Yeah, that global number, Al, just continues to keep a weight on the wheat market almost every other month at least. It seems like we just can't get the ball rolling in the right direction on the world side of things to get that number to decline. So
here's the numbers. Thanks, Bobby. From Brazil, corn and soybeans. Corn, last year they had some pretty major problems late in the season. The double crop corn was down 94.5 million metric tons. 101, CONAB coming in 100.4 today, 100.9. I've noticed a pattern within the USDA that unless things change dramatically, quite often, they don't make any changes. Brazil soybean crop at an all-time record. The currency at a record low. So they're really selling aggressively. Estimated half of the soybeans have been harvested in Brazil in about 80% of their crop. 116.5 a year ago, 125, 125.2. We're saying 125.5. The history is, Corey Bratland put a lot of these numbers together for this PowerPoint, that big crops tend to be bigger. Now, that's not necessarily true in Argentina. There, they're running some pretty major weather problems. Last year, they produced 46 million metric tons of corn. Major dry weather problems last year. 50 million metric tons in February. We're looking at 50.4 or 50.7. So the corn crop in Argentina is pretty good. I would not doubt that these are some of the larger numbers that we see. We work closely with Dr. Michael Cordonnier, talked with him today. Feels that with the dry weather impacting 25% of La Pampa, Buenos Aires, that they might see this begin to go lower. We're really splitting hairs though, because this is about the same amount of production as Minnesota, and people usually don't track Minnesota that close. Soybeans, a good crop. Again, some of these numbers might be some of the larger projections we see. This number is more likely to move lower in future reports. But the bottom line is you take Brazil, Argentina, Paraguay, Uruguay, Colombia, take all the countries down there producing crops and exporting, and they have a lot larger total supply of corn and soybeans coming out of South America than we did a year ago. Ending stocks, this is where we kind of change it up a little bit. A year ago, in this March report, USDA projected ending stocks of 1.835. For this year, not significantly different. USDA said 1.892 in February. The big uncertainty now with crude oil prices crashing is what's going to happen to ethanol production, but we are slightly larger than a year ago. Wow, here's the big change. Last year, projecting 900 million bushels in stocks of beans. We planted about 10 million acres less beans than had been expected. Bean yields are disappointing. We dropped to 425, trade says 432, we're at 430. That's the trend compared to a year ago. And the USDA, if you look all the way out, Bobby, to next year, I think that number's coming in at 321.
Great, yes, and that part there, Al, is still pretty amazing to think that we were looking at, closing in on 1 billion bushel carryout, just over a year ago.
Yep.
And now we are less than half of that. So it is quite an amazing turnaround. And once, like you said at the beginning of the presentation here, if we can get the Chinese trade deal and things to start working, and we see the actual export numbers hit the reports, weekly reports, it'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
Now, right now, the cheapest beans in the world are in Brazil, and so there's a lineup, I think, of about 30 ships, 20 million metric tons to be loaded in March and April. In fact, some of the ships now, the lines are so long in the Brazilian ports that they're actually rerouting them to the PNW. But what Secretary of Ag Perdue has said and what China's indicated is that they're going to try to honor the Phase 1 trade agreement, but that a lot of those purchases will be more out into the third and fourth quarter of this year, which is typically what they do. This time of year, Brazil and Argentina send a lot of soybeans to China. Our export sales tend to kick into high gear if and when they run out. So this is, again, I'll just correct this number. This is compared to March of 2019. Global ending stocks were at 308.5, 296.8, 297.4, 297.8. We're really splitting hairs here, but look at where we are versus a year ago. It is a 2 or 3% reduction. That is significant. We had a big drop in the U.S. soybean crop last year. So a year ago, March of 2019, projected ending stocks in soybeans 107.2. 98.9. So we're looking at numbers in here. These numbers usually don't get big surprises in here. If we get big surprises, quite often it's more in the projected crop size in Brazil and Argentina and in the ending stocks number. But these numbers, because they're so massive, here's what's disappointing. And Bobby, you mentioned this a year ago, 270.5, 288, 288.4. 288. We just have this huge burdensome supply of wheat that's hanging over us. So we had some crop production problems in Australia and Argentina, but that was offset by larger crops coming out of Russia and especially the EU this year. It seems like you don't ever have, you can find 1 or 2 countries that have some production problems, but overall those supplies just keep on racking up to bigger numbers all the time.
Right. The stocks for wheat, like you had mentioned, Al, is coming down, which is what we need to see in the U.S. for domestically, and where we need the global picture to change that on this global ending stocks. So when you do have, one or two of the major wheat producing countries across the globe have a concern, well, where are they going to go? And if that happens, and the U.S. is already starting to, see that, and domestic ending stocks decline, that's when the prices will see that quick move. And until you get that, till these global numbers start following kind of our domestic U.S. numbers lower, wheat in the middle range here, and with the negative headlines and such, it's pushed everything down to the lower end of that trading range.
And there's so many areas they're finding in Russia, and all the way up into even Siberia, to where they can grow the spring wheat if they get the right kind of conditions. So in those areas where land is very cheap, the infrastructure is just being developed, they just continue to pump out more and more wheat. I think we're going to have the lowest wheat acreage in the U.S. since 1909 this year. We continue to see the trend, if Mother Nature cooperates, of more soybeans every year at the expense of wheat. But even though we have the lowest level of wheat in over 100 years, and our supply of the global wheat production has now dropped to less than 10%. So when we're looking at wheat prices, when we're looking at weather problems developing in the world, it's really more important to be watching what's going on in Europe, Ukraine, Russia. Russia has just blown us away as far as becoming the #1 wheat exporter in the world right now. And with their currency crashing, much as similar to what we're seeing, the Brazilian real crashing, even though we think wheat prices are low and not profitable, when your currency is crashing like the Russian ruble and their land costs are less, all of a sudden they're back in a pretty good profit position. And some of those areas too, they just don't have the seed or the infrastructure for growing corn and soybeans. So it tends to be winter wheat, barley, oats, and they kind of mix those crops around, generally small grains, probably much as what they were growing in the Watertown, South Dakota 30 or 40 years ago, Bobby.
Yeah, it doesn't, and even from what we've seen in the last 20 years, Al, from the progression of the middle of the state moving to the east, we used to see a lot of that winter wheat planted, just, not that far from Watertown. It doesn't seem like hour and a half. And now you have to kind of get almost 2.5 hours closer to the river, middle of the state, before you start seeing the amount of winter wheat that used to be planted. It definitely is. It's changing based on the economics of what they can plant, what they can grow, and how well they can do it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, question comes in. We'll take one of these. Do you expect a seasonal low this week or next? What price level do you expect? And kind of nervously watching the stock market before I answer that, because I think if the stock market can stabilize in here and begin to improve, then we can probably see the grain markets put in a low. I'm writing in the weekly newsletter, wrote in last week's newsletter, that we have generally seen, especially the corn market bottom, right about every time the contract goes off. We had a bottom in September when September contract went off. The D's contract, on that continuation gapped higher, and then we had the next low come in right when December contract went off, and with the recent crash in the stock market, we've more than filled that gap. But about every 67 days, we've tended to put a low in the corn market, and so that would suggest March 13th. What's unusual, I didn't anticipate, and we talked about that when there was just a few people on, was when you look at the alignment of the futures, March was trading at an 8 or 10 cent premium to May, and if you look at my mouse over here, March corn's at 379, May's at 377, so about less than a minute to go. May corn is up 4 cents, 376 3/4. May soybeans up right at 9.5 cents, 879.5. May Chicago wheat up 2 3/4. Stock market a few minutes ago was down 150. We're currently down 82. We're up 1,000 overnight, so that's just been a real roller coaster, and that roller coaster in the stock index futures has impacted. So I got about 5 seconds to go till the release of the numbers, and we'll see if we get a green bar or red bar here in just a second, and then Bobby, Mark, Corey, anybody who gets those numbers, I'll go back and put those in. So I got 11. I'm surprised we're not seeing anything yet. So the numbers should be out.
You know, and with all the outside market, you know, wild and crazy ride we've seen here, Al, grain traders might be a little more at ease with the numbers, even if they're just a little bit outside of expectations too. That
Yeah.
could be that could be part of what we see here today.
The guy said it's too cheap to sell, but every time I buy it, I lose money, so I'm just going to go to the sidelines. And I think that's been the attitude of a lot of people. So we're getting to where we should have seen the numbers about 30 seconds or a minute ago. So far, a very muted reaction, really no reaction, but sometimes you won't really see reaction until 2 or 3 minutes later. But no report out yet on the WSDA website. So
yeah, I haven't seen it either.
Uncertainty usually takes prices lower, so at least so far we're not collapsing. We're still on the day. May corn up 3.5, December corn up 4, May beans up 9, the November new crop beans up 8.25. So, but it's worth noting too. I talk a lot about the March-May corn spread, the March to May soybean spread. Today it's real illiquid, pretty thin, but that's pulled into about 4 cents, and that had been 8 or 10 cents a couple weeks ago. And we'll see what the numbers are. If there's some problem in Washington, I'm not aware of it. So I apologize, but it's a little bit beyond my control. So
yep, still the link says not found on the WSDA website here, so nothing.
Well, the good news is that when we first started this, we were down 150 on the Dow. Now we're up 150. So we'll see if we can get the numbers out. I think what was it, about a year ago now, where some of the media people did some inappropriate things, so they could kick the media out, trying to level the playing field. But that was, I suppose, well intentioned. But what has happened is that it seems like we really have a lot of delays trying to get the numbers out for our numbers. So, Corey, if you see them, jump on, or I suppose you're waiting for it just like everyone else is. So.
Yep, just kind of looking for the numbers, and I'm looking on Twitter. I don't see any updates from there. So
I don't either. I see one so far, but nothing else to collaborate that.
All of a sudden, we're seeing corn tick to new lows, still higher on the day.
Looks like it did come out here, so we can't get rolling through it.
Initial reaction, I would say delayed reaction, looks like it would be possibly a little bit negative to corn, but I'll wait until we actually have the numbers. You see the big red bar developing. However, we're still up 2 3/4 cents on the day. Soybeans have been ticking lower over the last half hour, but at least are still up 9 cents on the day. I just feel better, Bobby, if we could get the March or the May beans up over that top. So we were in 901, 902, 903. We just can't get the nearby futures up and through there.
Just can't do it. If it could, it'd be interesting to see how many stops are sitting up there, Al. That's for sure.
And the funds are still pretty darn short the beans. So at some point, I think they could cry uncle. But right now, they're probably more worried about their crude oil positions than they are the grain positions.
From what I'm seeing on these, it looks like corn ending stock sale is 1.892.
I see that same number.
Soybeans is 425 unchanged.
Okay, let me see if I can grab the
headlines are starting to come out now. So,
Mark's running in. Thank you, Mark. Okay, so we'll try to. Mark just gave me Brazil and Argentina. Have to go into the. Okay. Good job, Corey. 101. Oops, don't want to do that. 101. And soybeans a little bit bigger. 126, and so no big surprise there. Argentina, Kept the corn unchanged, 50, and add a little bit, 54. So a little bit bigger on both Brazil and Argentina on the projected crop size. And did you have these numbers, Corey or Bobby? U.S. ending stocks?
See here, corn was 1.892, Corey.
Yep.
Okay.
Soybeans was 425, I think, is what you had said.
Yep.
Okay.
And 940 on the wheat.
940. So that's why we're not getting much of a lot of people expected a slight uptick in the Brazil and Argentine bean production. These numbers are just kind of a total non-event. I'll just point out again how much lower beans are versus a year ago, and we thought at one time we could see 1 billion bushels. Global ending stocks, any numbers there?
Yep. 297.3.
Okay.
102.4.
I don't like that, but that's what it is.
And
Still down from where we were a year ago.
287.1.
We just can't get a decent wheat number, so I would think this would be a little bit negative here for wheat. So now that we're through the delayed release, let's just take a look. Again, pretty stable. Corn, 376.5 on the May, up 3 3/4 cents. December, 380. So right on this corn, May corn, pretty critical support at 370. To look good, you'd have to get up over 388. The beans, the December corn last year, December 19 went off at 375. That's the area of support. I think we went to 374 3/4 earlier this week. May beans will become lead contract month. Currently, we're seeing them up 9 1/4 to really look good. We have to get the nearby bean contract, not March or May, to close above 902. We just run into a brick wall. I thought the wheat market would be lower. May Chicago wheat up 2.5. New crop and the KC wheat pretty quiet. The new crop contract up 3/4. Minneapolis wheat very subdued. We're down 3/4 on the May, up 1/2 on the new crop. So this is quite often this March report is kind of a non-event, and it looks like that is what we're going to see. We'll really get market moving reports when we get at the end of March. So, Bobby, any thoughts, any comments you have?
One question, Al, that I've gotten a few times in the last week, and I'm sure all of us have, is what will the stock market need to do in order for grain traders to get back to trading the grain markets and not these outside markets so much?
Well, the daily price range, we're down 2,013 points on Monday. We're up 1,090 points in the overnight market. When you get that type of extreme volatility, Dow futures moving 800, 1,000, 2,000 points, people just tend to go to the sidelines. They just say, I can't define my risk. I'm not going to go to it. And so stability in the stock market, stability in the energy market. When you think through, lower crude oil prices yesterday really tanked the stock market. It was negative to ethanol prices, therefore negative to corn prices. But if you have lower interest rates, a good chance the Fed will lower rates by another 0.5% when they meet here in about 10 days. You're also going to see, I think, much lower prices at the pump for people buying gasoline. That longer term, the people, countries that import a lot of food, just about all import energy. If their energy bill is less and people can get back to work, and they will have more money for food. So short term, lower energy prices carry over to impact lower commodity prices. Long term, lower energy prices is good for both U.S. and global consumers. So kind of a long-winded answer, Bobby, but stability in the energy market, stability in the stock market. Stock market is still relatively high. Now, we saw the stock market go up by a factor of 300% over a decade, and of that massive price rally right now, we've given up about 18%. So the other thing that's come up quite often is what's the impact of global recession on grain prices? Well, generally a global recession tends to be negative for consumers. However, when you look at the history of how the grain markets have performed during recessions in early 70s, 78 to 80, quite often we've went contrary to that. In general, I think farmers do good when there's free trade and expanding economic conditions. But because we are at such historic low prices in here, a recession, as long as it doesn't get real severe, does not really concern me. Other questions you see coming in? Market reaction pretty mute. We'll come back to it. A few final thoughts. Seasonal lows suggest low by late February, early March. We've just been doing some seminars, got through the Grain Trading Academy. 45-week lows were due in both corn and soybeans in the month of March. Stock market stabilizes in here. That could have occurred earlier this week. Bad news, investment uncertainty about coronavirus likely be over by late March. It seems like both China and South Korea are slugging their way through the worst of the problem. Growing concern about what's going on in Iran and especially Italy. We are focused on large areas of the U.S. Many forecasts for wet patterns continue. The Delta, southeastern part of the U.S., where they'd like to be planting corn, just not able to go. Texas, about 20% of that crop planted. They're actually much ahead of normal in that area. Texas not a big producer, but certainly when you look at the Delta southeastern states, that wet weather pattern looks like it's in place for at least another week. And then that wet pattern could flip to the Midwest. Coming up, Bobby, we're putting together seasonal trades the last Wednesday of the month. If you'd like to get that, they've got a good thing going there. Contact our office. We'll get you suggested trades. The webinar, the big one, March 31st, 10:45, quarterly grain stocks and prospective plantings. We will be sending our surveys out here in a week or so. And then Thursday, April 9th, final crop production, updated supply demand reports. So be ready. A lot of you on here have participated. We will be sending that out. Our survey is only sent to our subscribers. Your response is confidential. No one knows your numbers. Only the subscribers who participate will be sent the results in our trade recommendation. We do not make this available to DTN, Bloomberg, Dow, anybody. This is, I think we get really accurate, honest numbers because people trust that we will keep their information, and also they trust that this information is only provided back to our subscribers and only those people who participate. So if you want to get it, please participate. We've had great results. About half the time we've said, you know, it doesn't look much different than what the USD, the trade guesses are, so we have no trade recommendations. When we have, we quite often have recommended short-dated options, and the majority of the time we've had great results. I'm located in Wayzata, Minnesota, about 10 miles straight west of Target Field, where the Twins will start playing in about 14 days. Work closely with Corey Bratlin, Willow Lake, South Dakota, about 4 hours straight west of me. Bobby is in Watertown, South Dakota, about 3.5 hours straight west of me. Jacob, Brian, Laura work with us in Platteville, and hoping that pretty soon we'll be putting our office for Bismarck, North Dakota up there as well. So that's it. See any questions? I've had the one question about the seasonal low, which we've talked about. I don't really see any others. So yeah, this is of all the things I'm surprised with, I guess wheat market is probably within a dime a contract lows. It's pretty dangerous to go in there and short wheat. Soybean number, as expected, a little larger crops in both Brazil and Argentina. U.S. crush, I'm going to guess they've increased slightly. And so the ending stocks on soybeans at 420. It's really going to be watching U.S. weather, U.S. stock market, energy prices going forward, and what we see in our survey for the USDA prospective planning report, and also that very important grain stocks report. So we'll have those reports. We'll have that webinar in about 21 days, and I look forward to that one. So any other final thoughts, Bobby?
No, just that these outside markets are kind of going to dictate, like you had said, once we get things to calm down and start climbing back up where we've fallen from, you know, that'll help give these grain traders a little more calmness to their, you know, jumping in on trades based on the fundamentals and what they think the grain markets should be doing, and not having to worry about the flush in the outside markets like we've seen the last 10 days or 2 weeks. So
I think what we've seen, just while we've been doing this program, we started right at 10:45. The Dow is down 160. Now the Dow is up 308. So it's always a long, long time till we get to that closing at 3 o'clock. It is cattle limit down yesterday, cattle limit up today, hogs almost limit down yesterday, up 242. So the stability in the stock market, energy market, helping grain prices stabilize, but also it's helping the meat markets rally back as well. So as I sent in the internal email yesterday, the world is not going to come to an end. And we did make the buy recommendations on corn, soybean meal, and energy yesterday. And so far, those look like they're good recommendations. So please, if you do have questions, call us toll free at our office in Wayzata, 888-345-2855. If you're in central, southern South Dakota, Nebraska, you can reach Corey, 888-751-2256. Bobby, thanks for your help in the program. Watertown, South Dakota, 888-282-6141. Brian, Jacob, Laura, if you're in southern Wisconsin, Illinois, 888-747-0843. So be safe out there, and we'll hopefully see many of you participate in this webinar on March 31st. Good day.